This is Greg Remke with Economic Thinking. We hold programs for high school and homeschool debaters on the economics of each year's topics. This presentation is on economic freedom and U.S. Foreign policy toward Central America. The listed countries: Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. So let me run through this. We have seminars we hold through the fall. If you're a debate club that would be interested in a 3 or 4 hour workshop, we'd be happy to do that for you either online or in person. So on economicthinking.org, I have a number of posts related to the Central America topic, most recently on the pathway for foreign trained physicians, healthcare professionals to come to the US from medical schools, let's say in Guatemala and other Central American countries. Another one on bananas, given that exports from Ecuador and other Central American countries and banana and coffee are a major part of U.S. current engagement in those countries. Another on the history of U.S. involvement in Latin America and interventions in the past. And then one just a general critical of foreign policies, U.S. programs to try to help Latin American countries get out of poverty that so far have not been successful and are the centerpiece of current U.S. Central America policy. So the major part of this topic, I would argue, in 2024 is informal, illegal, irregular immigration over the southern border from the Northern Triangle, from Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras. Huge numbers have come illegally to the U.S. and are still coming through the southern border. It's a major political issue, and I would think that would be something that many debate teams will focus on in changing our foreign policy. Currently, the White House has a policy toward the Northern Triangle. This is you can go to the White House fact sheet page with Vice President Harris launches the public-private partnership for the current programs with Latin America, which is to try and stimulate economic development in these countries so that fewer people will decide to come illegally to the United States and reduce poverty and deprivation there. So here's a program just announced. Purdue University gets a $30.8 million contract from USAID for the Food for Progress project to address the root causes of migration from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras. And the goal here apparently is more investment in agriculture will help people stay and be farmers in Central America instead of coming to the US. I would argue better policy would be build cities in Central America. Around the world, people are migrating to cities in the tens, hundreds of millions, and that's happening in Central America, but the cities in Central America aren't functioning. So people go to cities that are functioning, which is Houston, Dallas, other cities in the United States. But if the cities work better in Central America, then people would more likely migrate to their own cities, stay in their own countries. The Free City of Prospera is a charter city on the Atlantic side of Honduras, and it is of interest, and I'll come back to that in discussing innovative market-based approaches to development in Central America. So here, to give a background on this, here's a paper from the Heritage Foundation, 2021, from their Index of Economic Freedom, and they update this index every year. But the author here is saying it's the lack of economic freedom in Central America that's spurring the mass migration, not lack of adequate agricultural policy or U.S. investment in agriculture. So he argues the key takeaways, the illegal migration from this country stems from their pervasive economic government failures. It's very difficult to start a business, property rights are insecure, the legal system is corrupt, crime is endemic. So what those countries need is economic resilience, market-based policies, and it's a challenge. But these are countries that are richly blessed with natural resources, the author says. So they could do a lot more, and maybe agriculture is the center of improving more economic productivity. Certainly been very helpful in Peru, for example. But economic governance, who owns the property? Can they import and export? How transparent is the legal system? These are the issues discussed in the Economic Freedom Index, a measure of 10 measures of economic freedom. And the idea is the freer countries are, the more prosperous they are, and the less likely people are to migrate away illegally. And you can read the full study on the Heritage Foundation website. There's other economic freedom indexes as well. So a background on this, why the core question of why are people in America so much wealthier than in Central America? How can someone, whether they're educated or not, just get on an airplane, fly from there to here, and suddenly there are opportunities for work, double, triple, quadruple? Where does the wealth come from? How did America get so wealthy? Well, one view is America's wealthy is because we exploited other countries through colonialism, unfair trade. This is sort of the Marxist or socialist view that the rich countries get rich by exploiting the developing world. Well, that's misleading according to a World Bank study. Natural capital, people say, well, America wealthy also because of all the forests and the rich agricultural land for growing crops, minerals that we can oil under the ground and so forth, that we're rich because we're blessed with these natural resources. But natural capital, the capital from these things, some 5% of total wealth. It's a small amount. And even produced capital, the machinery we have, the factories, structures, the roads, all that, that's important, but it's estimated to be some 18% of total wealth. The intangible capital is the vast majority, some 77%. So that encompasses the raw labor, the human capital, the knowledge that people have, but it's the sum of the population's knowledge and skills, the level of trust in a society, and the quality of its formal and informal institutions. And that last phrase, formal and informal institutions, is what the focus of the Economic Freedom Index is, the legal institutions. Let's say your family has a company here in Seattle that's doing well. You decide you're going to invest in Honduras or Guatemala, buy some property, build a factory, hire people, and start producing your product there. Well, that turns out to be very hard to do for various reasons. Getting permits, being able to import and export raw materials, import, export your finished goods. There are various restrictions there. And those restrictions are a big part of what separates wealthy countries from poor countries, and that's the purpose of discussing this in this book by Arnold Kling and Nick Schultz, and you can read a synopsis online as well as read the articles about it. So to learn more, I also recommend this documentary, which is a little dated now, with Hernando de Soto, who's an economist in Peru, titled Globalization at the Crossroads. And he again is focusing, why is it that some places are so wealthy and others so poor? He, in the documentary, focuses on countries in Africa and his homeland, Peru, on how difficult it is to own farmland yourself and develop your own farms and similar, but the lessons presented here are similar to the story, the problems in Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Belize, other Central American countries. So the documentary is free. I encourage you to watch it and get a sense of what the economic background is. And this is presenting globalization in a positive way. We often hear of it as negative, but globalization allows wherever you are to tap into world markets. People in Honduras and Guatemala, that work at a small factory, they should be able to sell their goods and services to people in the US, people in Europe. What is limiting their access to the global economy and the status quo? Funded by the John Templeton Foundation, and I often play a little segment of this in my workshops. For a debate, here's a debate on globalization of labor markets. The argument here is that, why shouldn't people in these Central American countries get a job in the US, a legal job? We're not in favor of illegal immigration or refugees necessarily, but why not allow people to apply for a job, take a job at a meat packing plant or a factory or installing carpeting or painting all over the US, working for US firms that have a severe labor shortage right now. And this is a debate. What used to be called intelligent squared debate is now open to debate. And you can watch this debate with experts, both for and against, in this debate. So if we value a free market in goods and free movement of capital, shouldn't we also embrace a free movement of labor? And for debaters, you don't have to, this year, you don't have to open up global migration markets to the US, but why not allow qualified workers to apply legally to work for US firms and focus on stopping illegal immigrants, stopping terrorists and criminals, but allowing people that want to work to work. It's often outlined in the red card solution, which I'll present later. So, reciprocal treaties would allow citizens of the US and other countries to work legally across borders. We could work in those countries as well. So, the economics of immigration, it's often misleading as if immigrants are going to take our jobs and it hurts our wage rates and labors. And this is pretty much unfortunate. Both Republicans and Democrats in this currently have been very skeptical of immigration, where presidents like Ronald Reagan and George Bush have been far more open to legal immigration into the US. And the reason is sort of interesting. In the US, we have very few uh, uh, from our people who go to college who pursue PhD in engineering, high-level scientists, and we have also very few that don't get a high school education. So we're sort of like egg-shaped, not as many at the top, not as many at the bottom. But around the world, it's the opposite shape. There are lots of PhDs and scientists, especially China and India, but also in Mexico and has many education programs, Guatemala as well, and they're restricted from coming into the US. Similarly, there's huge numbers in Latin America, especially who, didn't finish high school, who don't speak English, who are not at an advantage in the US labor markets, but they can do hard work that's very beneficial. And what happens is when you combine the US labor or human capital profile with the profile of immigrants and put the two together, you get a complementary situation where it benefits Americans, workers that help with, uh, let's say, a hospital. Biggest cause of death in US hospitals is mistakes and infections in the hospitals. And so you need to really work at cleaning a hospital. I don't know how many in your audience here wants to work as in a hospital, cleaning the floor and making sure there aren't germs there. But that often isn't a high paying job that Americans don't want to do. But immigrants, it's much higher pay than cleaning hospitals in Central American countries. So we ought to welcome more workers that fit into the US labor profile and help America be more prosperous. And it helps the immigrants too. And in fact, I use immigrants in this overhead, but I'm going to argue we're better off using the term labor mobility. Let people come and work and go back home. Most don't want to be citizens. They just want to work, earn money, and then go back to their family. And inexpensive airfare would make that possible. Again, I'll discuss this more. So the discussion, and this is a lot of text. I'm going to go through this quickly, but these overheads will be available. Um, the economic freedom principles, improvements in economic freedom in the listed Central American countries would advance prosperity and stability there and dramatically reduce informal or illegal immigration to the US. So, what US policy reforms would one advise? Well, first, the US could stop current policies that impair or reduce economic freedom in Central American countries. So, that's a research job for the students to look at what we're currently doing. Current policy, typical for the sort of left of center Biden administration, is promoting climate and energy, renewable energy, public health policies, labor mobility, uh, reducing it like current policy restricts it, and promoting various welfare and other programs. So, what I recommend the Economic Freedom Index, one by the Wall Street Journal, cited above, and Heritage Foundation, the other by the Fraser Institute and Bridwell Institute at Southern Methodist University. also the Doing Business Index, and there are other indexes where you can look up each of the listed countries and get a review of where they stand on measures of economic freedom. And these economic freedom principles, they aren't new. From Adam Smith and before, they recommended reducing barriers to trade, that is to voluntary exchange, reducing barriers to investment, so US companies can invest in Central American countries, reduce barriers to travel and labor mobility, which could be called migration. And again, the major problem is the illegal migration into the US. It's a giant issue, it's a chaos. So, how do we best resolve it? I would argue the best or one of the best proposals would be work visas and the red card solution. You can read about this online. Basically, it says if you want to come to the US, you go to a employment office, let's say in Guatemala, you look for job opportunities. Companies in the US that need workers are advertised, you register for the job. You're vetted by security firms, the same ones the US military uses to make sure you're not a terrorist or a criminal. You apply for the job. If you're selected, you get a red card that documentations that you're legal. You get a 5-year renewable work visa, and you can work at that company. You're paying your taxes and healthcare and so forth. And it's a formal process of labor mobility. And if you decide later you want to become a US citizen, well, you go through the approval process. But again, most people just want to work, they want to earn money. And right now, the current system stops them from going back. It's too dangerous. It's illegal. We want them to come legally if they want to, and if US companies want to hire them. The current policy subsidizes refugees and blocks labor mobility. So, a case, aid to refugees, this is another part of our current policy. People are coming because they learn they can apply to become a refugee and get in the country, also get released in the country and work while they're waiting for their day in court. Instead, refugee support should be non governmental from churches, charities, community groups, relatives mainly. The federal government should focus on security. That's their concern, national defense. Let lettuce pickers, roofers, painters, hotel workers, etc., apply to work in the US, be vetted, and come here if they're approved and healthy. So that's the red card solution proposal made some years ago. Waiting to move forward here. Well, let me stop for now and then I'll record more in a bit.